The Albanese government wants to socialise Australia's housing bubble. I mentioned last time how Australia has conducted many housing affordability inquiries over the past 20 years. Thousands of work hours and millions of dollars in wages and consulting fees have been wasted on these reports, with little practical effect. I also mentioned last time how the Coalition wants to ease credit and lending standards in a bid to encourage more first-time home buyers into the housing market. Coalition home ownership spokesman Andrew Bragg said that he wants to, quote, tilt the scales in favour of home buyers by making loan approvals easier. Andrew Bragg said that he wants to rescue the Australian dream. The Coalition's push to relax lending standards is in direct contravention of the 2019 Hayne Banking Royal Commission, which explicitly, as its number one recommendation, recommended against removing responsible lending laws. Put simply, the Hayne Banking Royal Commission did not want Australian credit standards to be watered down. And for very good reason. Relaxing lending standards would pour more fuel on Australia's housing bonfire. There is simply no evidence that credit in Australia has been constrained. Average loan sizes have risen alongside house prices. So throwing more credit at the affordability problem will only make the situation worse by increasing household debt and eroding financial stability. Put simply, Australia's expensive housing is a price issue, not a leverage or borrowing issue. Not to be outdone, the Albanese government is preparing to reintroduce its stalled Help to Buy shared equity housing bill into Parliament next week to put pressure on the Australian Greens. Under Labor's Help to Buy scheme, the federal government would contribute up to 40% of the cost of a property, thereby enabling first home buyers with limited savings to enter the property market. So for example, if a home cost $1 million, home buyers would only need to stump up $600,000 plus stamp duty. Like the Coalition's plan to ease lending standards, Labor's Help to Buy scheme is another phony demand-side affordability measure that would ultimately raise housing demand, put upward pressure on house prices, and is ultimately self-defeating from an affordability perspective. The reality of the situation is that there are other ways that the federal government should be helping first home buyers. The number one solution to the housing affordability crisis is to cut immigration back to historical post-war levels, as shown on the chart on the left. Excessive levels of immigration is especially bad for first home buyers because, first, it drives up rents, thereby making it harder for first-time buyers to save a housing deposit. Secondly, it drives up prices, which pushes home ownership further out of reach. To its credit, the Coalition has at least promised to cut immigration, as illustrated in the chart on the right. Another way that the federal government could genuinely help first home buyers is via broad-based tax reform that lowers income taxes and reduces property investment concessions. Reducing demand from investors would boost first home buyers and increase Australia's home ownership rate. As illustrated in the chart on the right, there is a direct negative correlation between investor demand and first home buyer demand. Therefore, if you can reduce investor demand, you'll necessarily increase first home buyer. It's worth also pointing out that Treasury's 2023 intergenerational report warned that personal income tax revenue as a share of total tax revenue will increase to 58.4% of total taxes by 2062-63 from a record 51% currently. This is particularly worrying for would-be first home buyers who must work to save a deposit to buy a house. Obviously, if we tax them more through their working life, it's going to be a lot harder for them to enter the housing market. This is another reason why broad-based tax reform is so important to shift the tax burden away from productive workers towards other sources. The sad reality is that our politicians do not genuinely want to fix the affordability situation because it would require Australian house prices to fall. They will never reduce immigration to reasonable sustainable levels below 120,000 a year so that housing supply can keep up with demand, although to its credit, the Coalition has at least promised cuts. Nor will our politicians undertake broad-based tax reform to shift economic activity away from housing speculation. Instead, politicians pretend to care by providing false solutions and hope to would-be first home buyers while systematically driving up the cost of housing through demand-side stimulatory policies. Anyway, thanks for watching. I often describe the two major parties as Pepsi and Coke. Sure, there's differences at the margin. In the end, they're ultimately neoliberal stooges who don't genuinely want to fix Australia's appalling housing situation. They'll keep force-feeding our major cities with ridiculous amounts of immigration, forcing Australians to rent in high-rise dog box apartments. They'll keep pumping the demand side of the housing market and claim that it's an affordability measure. Meanwhile, Australia's house prices and rents will continue to become increasingly unaffordable. Sadly, that's the reality of Ponzi Australia. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.